think green thumb, right, if you're a gardener, gray thumb, kind of gardener of technology. So that's the, and the gray thumb group started in about 3-4 years ago in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with a bunch of really cool MIT nerds who started meeting in a pub. And I see there's some beer here, which is in honor of the original gray thumb and current Massachusetts gray thumb location. And this 12 years ago, I started an organization called Biota. Biota.org is the website. And that organization was, the idea was that virtual worlds were arising on the internet at that time, in the mid-90s. And that in a long van drive with Chris Langton in Santa Fe in 1994, I was talking for Chris's ear off as he was nursing a full leg cast. That artificial life would one day occur in cyberspace as an experimental medium, but inside multi-user worlds. This would happen. And there were no multi-user worlds on the net or anything, so it was kind of hard for Chris to understand what he was talking about. But several years later, Chris got addicted to Alpha World, which I'm very proud of, and was found in there talking about motorcycles all hours of the day and night. So the idea of Biota was an organization that would kind of capture some of the original visionary aspects of the early artificial life conferences, especially the first one that happened in Santa Fe in '87, but do it with a much broader interdisciplinary community. So Biota.org was founded in 1996, and we decided to hold a conference at a very unusual place in August of 1997, which was at the Burgess Shale. Does anybody know anything about Burgess Shale? The Burgess Shale is this very odd place. It's a very special place, sort of a mecca for paleontologists. It's about a city block long fossil quarry at 8,000 feet in the Canadian Rockies that was discovered by James Doolittle Walcott on horseback in 1905. And it contains soft body tissue preserved creatures from 535 million years ago. It's a very, very special place on the Earth. So the first Biota conference, which was called Digital Burgess, was at the Burgess Shale. And we hiked 60 people, somewhat overweight, behind the computer type people, and some fit people, all helping each other to the Burgess Shale up to in 1997, and then we had a conference at the Banff Center. So that blended paleontology, an active field camp, people who are working on Cambrian creatures, artists, science fiction writers, etc. We held 3 more conferences. One was at Cambridge at Magdalen College, and that was hosted by Richard Dawkins and Douglas Adams. And actually, the current God delusion work of Richard Dawkins came from that conference, from a speech that Douglas made at that conference. The third one was at San Jose State in 1999. It was hosted by Rudy Rucker and Bruce Sterling. So they brought the kind of science fiction, imaginative view of what artificial life might become someday. And the fourth one was embedded in the American Paleontological Convention in Berkeley in 2001. Then the winter occurred of the .com crash, and you could not get sponsorships. So about 3 years ago, Biota started rejuvenating itself as a podcast. So we took all our old conference talks, including Dawkins and Adams and whatnot, and put it into this podcast run by Tom Barbalet. And it's grown to have a large listening audience and a live talk show every Friday that you can call in as a regular phone and talk about artificial life and evolution and technology and synthetic biology and the philosophy of all this. And that was growing tremendously. And then the Gray Thumb group started in Boston, and then we made a connection with them, and I went out there in March and did a presentation there in a pub, very noisy pub, and offered to set up branches to sort of franchise the Gray Thumb, because their idea was that Gray Thumb was going to be a homebrew club. Does anybody remember the homebrew computing club of days of yore? Their model for Gray Thumb was the homebrew computer club for people messing around with biology and bits, kind of in a general term. And I love that because I have a computer museum and a collection of stuff, and I love the homebrew ethos, and that's what this is. And so we started the Silicon Valley Bay Area Gray Thumb. in March, I think March or April. This is the third official meeting. And we started one in London as well. And I just came from the London group. And the London group has 60 people. It was held, the meeting is sponsored by the British Computer Society on the Strand, right in central London, a beautiful place. And it was just a fantastic meeting. So there's a Grey Thumb in Rotterdam or in Amsterdam that Gerald de Jong is involved with. There was a Grey Thumb meeting, I think, in Washington, D.C. There was one in Rome. So it's like Dorkbot. Anybody know about Dorkbot? It's these clubs that spread, and these clubs are very informal. There's no real structure to them. They just believe in the same philosophy. And I think the Grey Thumb philosophy is a little bit like the biota philosophy. It's diverse people coming together who are fascinated with the confluence of technology and biology, whether it be simulating evolution, creating a full ecosystem simulation, doing synthetic biology, the philosophy, science fiction about it, that kind of thing. My favorite proposal to this group, in a sense, this is a rebirth of the artificial life movement as it was in the early 90s. This is a rebirth of it as occurring. And my little injection of an idea for this community this time around is very simple. I call it the evolution grid, or the Evo grid. And the idea is that if you build a simulated ecosystem of some sort, or even a synthetic, real wet biology, chemistry ecosystem, then what the idea was, instead of having them isolated in their own walled gardens like they were in the early 90s, I mean, Carl Sims' connection machine-based environment couldn't be connected to anything else, right? Polyworld, which ran on SGI workstation, they couldn't be really connected easily with other things, and there wasn't a strong Web 2.0 architecture. There was no XML, no nothing. So you couldn't really connect these individual simulations. And the idea that I'm putting forth for the Grey Thumb communities as they grow is, let's try to work together as a grid this time. So the perfect example that I like to give is Claude Latoud in Paris has an artificial life group where he does simulated L-system plants. And it's a beautiful system. It's called Darwin's Park. And they're going to be publishing it open source online for the public probably in a few months. And it's great. It has the plant's roots follow the chemical concentrations in the virtual soil, and the plants shade each other. It's really amazing. Darwin's Park is amazing, except it blows your polygon budget and you can't render it after a while. That's a problem to be solved. But what Claude mentioned was we'd love to have simulated ants, some kind of an insect object that would come into a Darwin's Park and would start chopping away at the L-system generated leaves and stems, because it would generate all this interesting behavior. And that's the idea of the Evo grid. So if you have some great ants, or Anomalocaris, or mouse simulation, which probably is a little bit too ambitious, you could package up what is the extant properties of your creature or your object and send it into Claude's simulation, which would then unwrap it and have it bind with his world. Now, Claude's world, one of the things that we commented about was, do you have gravity in here? Oh, no, we didn't think of that. Well, ants will arrive in your world and they'll say, we need gravity. We have to have gravity. So Claude's world would start to change to get gravity and get some of the affordances needed for the ant simulation to work with Claude's world. And one of the reasons I'm pushing this idea is because I think it will tremendously help the field of artificial life. So everything big today is done in grids. The gene folding grid, SETI at home, Second Life, they're all based on large grids of machines that cooperate. And artificial life, or if you want to come up with another term for the field, whatever, needs to have a grid that everybody's a member of. So when you get tired of working on your project and you can't redo any more code, it's still an active citizen of the grid, and someone else can pick it up and change protocols and keep growing it. So the field that we're in doesn't undergo this kind of mass extinction like it did in the 90s. So that's kind of coming to the end of the story. But I'm actually, as a student again, after 22 years. So I'm now a student in the UK university system at a place called the Smart Lab. And it's funny, the administrator came into our lab and said, "You're a C." I said, "Is that my grade?" "No, you're a C in your record. That means you're actually an enrolled student in the graduate program." So, and my thesis topic is the Evo Grid, is trying to encourage the Evo Grid. I can't write any code anymore. I could try, but it'd be frightening. You might not want to let me do it. But trying to encourage to see that the Evo Grid comes about in 3 to 4 years, and then write about it, document it, proselytize it, write the philosophy of it. I was sitting in Richard Dawkins' drawing room, if you still call it that, in the UK about 5 years ago, and I talked to him about this Evo Grid idea, and he said he would sign on, he would love to see it happen, and he would like to evaluate it. So I will probably go back to him, see if I can still have T in his drawing room. Probably can't, and see if he'll sign on. So we should be able to sign on all the original artificial life people to be members of this, of doing a grid, and whether there's an annual competition happening as a result of all these network-connected worlds, which is Zan's concept from years ago, which we'll talk about. Or something just emerges. If something emerges out of the grid, there have to be some really interesting people around to write about it and to think about it and observe it. And so that's the end of my my little introductory spiel. And if you evogrid.org is where the site is, and we're building a wiki on biota.org. And the EvoGrid project is discussed every other week or so on Biota Live on the podcast, if you want to join in. And without further ado, you're going, Zan, you're going to go first. This is Zan Gill, who I met at NASA Ames 6 years ago, something like that, creating a think tank at the time, and formerly of Australia, and previously of many places. So you're probably best introduce yourself. But she's going to present. She's been writing a book for 5 or 6 years, which is on the verge of completion. There's actually 2 variants of the book, and there's a website, and the book really touches on a lot of things about artificial life and the philosophy of it and the people who are building it and what it all means sort of in the big picture.